This is Jay Edwards. He's a instruction librarian from University of Oklahoma Libraries. Today, his presentation is KeyWordPlay, Playfulness, and Information Literacy.
All right, thank you, Catherine. So as Catherine said, I'm Jay, and today, um, as part of the first part of the UCD's learning module, we're going to talk a little bit about playfulness and some of my research on how playfulness feeds into information literacy and searching for information. We'll go over a little bit of that about giving people permission to play, how it fits into the ACRL framework vocabulary, and then some creative and collaborative searching. I plan on giving about a 10-minute break, about an hour in, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. And after the break, we'll go over gamification and game creation. I will be using extensive use of the chat. So be sure that you have that ready. You're welcome to raise your hand if you need to, if you're wanting to talk to us through your voice, but we will be using the chat and some of the functions where you can reply to each other. And then, of course, feel free to use as many of the reactions and emojis as you want. So before I begin today, I want to say that even as we meet virtually, I want to respectfully acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities whose traditional, ancestral, and sovereign lands we live and work on today. Librarians have an important role in providing plentiful resources and education about America's rich indigenous heritage and the current contributions of tribal nations. And if you have not already, anytime that you're in the metro, please consider visiting the First Americans Museum of Oklahoma. And I know that I'm talking to librarians, but if you happen to be able to donate to the museum, feel free to. So a little bit about me. I've been at OU Libraries for about 17 years. Got my MLIS from OU only about 3 years ago, and I'm just now the instruction librarian starting in July of last year. A lot of my research on play is informed by my other life doing improvisation. I've been improvising for about 23 years now, and I'm currently the improv director for the Norman Medieval Fair cast, which is pictured here. And the next Norman Medieval Fair for 2024 is going to be the first weekend in April. So what do I mean when I'm talking about play? Well, nothing is going to make you give you imposter syndrome, much like doing research in a field where no one agrees on a definition of what you're researching. So a good broad general definition of play is free movement within a more rigid structure. So you can think of a play of like a steering wheel, how much it's going to move before it hits the mechanism and starts steering you. You can also think of performing music or performing in a theatrical play, where there's the sheet music or the script, which is your structure, but you still have to make a lot of decisions for how you're going to play it. And then, of course, there are playing games, which has the structure, but the choices that you have to make are varied and legion. Playfulness is the predisposition to reframe a mundane situation as play. So think of any mundane situation that you might be in, like doing laundry or mowing the lawn or something like that. You can have a playful attitude toward that, such as maybe doing laundry, you're doing things in a different order. Maybe you're experimenting using different detergents and chemicals, folding things in different ways in different orders, maybe even singing or dancing while you're doing it, maybe making laundry puns as you're doing it. So people can be playful regardless of the activity, even with something as dry as searching for information. You can look at a database, you can play with it, you can even think of a database as a kind of video game, something that's responding to you as you're making different choices. The psychologist Luciano Labate. So the problem with the previous definition is that it's too broad and it has nothing to do with people, right? It's about anything. So this Italian psychologist, Luciano, came up with this definition that I like because it's really modular. He says that play consists of an active rather than a passive, spontaneous rather than demanded, guided, or requested. So in library speak, we would say rather than imposed, and voluntary rather than involuntary, involvement or engaging, interactive, that is pleasurable, so low stakes, low stress, and even satisfying, and relatively prolonged, meaning reiterative and nonlinear. We're going to get back to this after we talk a little bit about play and how this feeds into information literacy. But first, I want to ask you to describe a time in the chat where you discovered something you weren't expecting while exploring. And you could have been exploring information or a real place or a virtual place. And as you're thinking and typing, I'm going to give an example from my life. Many, many years ago, we went down to convention in Colorado Springs, and there's a little suburb there called Manitou Springs. And we had a hotel down there. And one time I decided I'm just going to go on a walk. Manitou Springs has like 2 streets and mountains on either side. And I'm just going to go walk up. And while walking in this very small town, I came across an entire alleyway that was lined wall to wall with arcade games. Just all sorts of classic arcade games like Pac-Man and Mortal Kombat, and some of the more up-to-date ones from back then. It was about 2008. And like, I would have never known about this if I was just like reading facts about places. I came across this completely by accident because I was exploring. I was just walking down a road. I picked a direction. I went there and I found it. So, what times have you been exploring or just playing around something and found something that you didn't expect? Liz says she was playing around with the instrument panel on her car, pressing random buttons, see what they do, and found out that the trunk release was there when pressed the other direction. Closes the trunk. Interesting. Now I'm going to have to try that with my car. So, and then Jennifer says, driving to the dentist, stopped by Real Taco in Bixby, and you discovered the best burrito tacos ever. All right.
Kathy said in 2013, my husband said he wanted to go to see Paul McCartney. I didn't have a clue who that was, but I do like going out and experiencing new things. Little did I know that Paul would touch my soul and I would end up as a moderator on a Beatles forum.
Yeah, that's nice. Because yeah, being playful means being kind of open, right, to new experiences. And if you're just and I mean, I know that I do this like when I go to the store, and I have my list, I go get the list. But being able to explore something means that you'll be not only just more aware of like what your car does, what stuff is available at a restaurant, and what music exists. Even going on, sometimes when I get on YouTube or Spotify, like I try to do my best to erase my history there and try to do something incognito so that I can find new music and new creators. Oh yeah. And then, but sometimes, of course, it's hard to be controlled in an Aldi. So, excellent. So thinking about that, thinking about this concept of exploration, of being open to new paths, why should we combine play with information literacy? Well, first consider that students are going to encounter different databases, different catalogs, and different search engines throughout their life. Like even in the 4 years, perhaps maybe fewer, maybe longer that they are at your school, they're going to have more databases than the one that you might be able to, the one that you're going to have time teaching them. We usually teach academic search complete or an EBSCO product to a lot of the first year students, but as they get deeper into their subject areas, they're going to start using different databases that behave in different ways. And then after they graduate, they're going to be using different databases in the workplace, maybe a payroll database that they have to use, database at their local library, and they're going to be using commercial databases like Amazon, Academy Sports, Target, which are databases. They're databases of stuff instead of information, but they behave the same way, right? They use the filters. You're putting in search terms to find objects, and they're going to behave differently than the stuff that you teach them. But some of the skills that we can teach them now are going to transfer. And then over time, click, there we go. Any given database or catalog is going to change their processes, their features, their algorithms, their subject headings, and more. So specific strategies that we teach them today may not apply after they overhaul the system. And then the information environment is constantly evolving. There's not just new information that's being added, but sometimes they reorganize information, and then there are millions of items. And so every information need you're going to be looking at a different section of that information. And so in almost every experience is going to be a little different. And then it helps them be open and inclusive of different voices and other ways of knowing. So considering terms that different communities might be using for example, the LGBT community is constantly thinking through and updating their terminology. Even that acronym that I just used probably dates me a little bit. Like doesn't put me way early, but is not as up to date as I should be. But if you put that acronym into a computer, it's going to come up with different items than if you use an earlier acronym, a later acronym, or specific terminology such as queer. So how do you know which ones to use? You're only really going to know that when you start looking at the literature and pulling the information and then experimenting with that terminology in a database. Also consider different information sources like non-print and like video, and non-academic sources like social media. Find out where scholars in the field are sharing ideas less formally outside of the traditional forms of scholarly communication. So being open to different forms of information. Talking a little bit about some of the benefits of why we want to use play. Play is a method of active learning, of literally exploring and figuring out what are your capabilities in a certain situation and what are your limitations. And then as you're doing this, you're constructing new knowledge, adding new information to what you've already known before. It's also a form of failure recovery, your ability to bounce back when your plan doesn't work. Being able to step back, retrace your steps, and then change something and then continue exploring down a different way. And this reduces the consequences of failure. So if a student's search strategy failed, they could be with the thought process that, if I don't find these resources, I might fail this paper, which means I might fail this class, which means I might get kicked out of school. But with a more playful attitude, we can say, wait, take a step back. make another decision, maybe a different keyword, different subject heading, different filters, and then explore a different route. So we're not necessarily tying our current search strategy to the grade that you're going to make in a paper, since we're with a bit more of an open mind, we can not see every failure as dominoing down the line, but we can take a step back and try again. Looking back at Luciano Slabate's definition of information literacy, we can see how this fits in with information literacy. So first of all, play is active. Well, how is information literacy active? We're searching for resources, we're evaluating them. And as we are in a search engine or a catalog or database, we're manipulating those search results to get results that are a little bit more relevant to what we're looking for. Play is spontaneous. And information literacy is based on an evolving information need. As you learn more, the more your need evolves. And of course, it's driven by curiosity. Hopefully you're researching something that you're curious about. And they are doing some drilling on at the outside of my building. So apologies if you can hear that. And then play is voluntary. And information literacy is in some respects self-motivated. Now, you may know of the term called the imposed inquiry, and this means a question that someone else is making a patron or user ask. So that's basically in a K-12 or a college context, that's the teacher or professor giving them an assignment and telling them, put together a research question, and that's what you bring to the library. Now, hopefully the professor has given them, has set broad parameters, and they can choose within those parameters what their topic is. So in almost every sense, that question is going to be imposed because it's going to be for some kind of research or a grade. I don't know how long that's going to be. Can you hear that? The drilling? Okay, it's all in my head. All right. So with a more playful attitude, we can help people see how much of their question is their own and how much is imposed on them. So play is also involvement. And I distinguish involvement from being active because you can be active without being very interactive or engage in something. Like if you imagine jogging, like I check out whenever I'm jogging. So I'm active, but I'm not paying attention. So involvement is being aware of the information that you're seeing. What are you seeing in your search results? How do you respond to them? And are you getting relevant results, or do you need to manipulate the search further? Or do you want to engage with a specific resource and determine whether it's credible or useful? You're also actively learning about the information. You're learning who's writing about a topic. You're learning what jargon they use. You're learning what kind of research questions are happening in the field. And so even exploring a topic when you're doing a search is itself a learning activity. Play is also pleasurable. And we've already talked a little bit about curiosity, about satisfying that curiosity. But we also need, we can't say that searching for information is automatically low stakes or is automatically low stress, because for some people it's going to be high stress, partially because of that imposition of a grade, and partially because of interacting with a new database and a wall of text and a bunch of features that you don't understand. And so part of our job is the emotional labor of helping students through that stress and that anxiety. And then play is relatively prolonged, which means it's reiterative, nonlinear. We're going to be constantly taking those steps back, trying new directions. learning new information as you're reading something and then going back and doing a second search, and then of course, failure recovery. So another question for you all. Describe a time that you had to learn a new database or catalog or search engine on your own, a new one, or one of those databases that you frequently use changing something about itself, like having an overhaul or starting a new, changing a rule or some kind of feature. And then for to follow up either of those questions, how did you figure out how to use the new thing? EBSCO, just recently. It has not changed for me. And I don't know if if I have to clear my cache and see everything, but that's happened to me with how many of you use CQ Researcher? Congressional Quarterly Researcher. That's a database that we subscribe to. And recently, last year, within the last 6 months, they overhauled their system. And I don't like it. I have, and you know, there are some pros, some cons. It's probably a net fine. And then working with Folio currently and EBSCO.
Encyclopedia Britannica has changed multiple times as well.
Say again?
April says Encyclopedia Britannica has changed multiple times.
Oh, yeah. Their website?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I had to, Jennifer says I started my PhD program for a while. I used our library and my new school's library in tandem with each other to figure out the difference. Liz says I figure out things by pressing buttons. I've yet to break the internet or a database.
Yeah.
And Kathy says when we migrate to Sierra to, I don't know how to pronounce that. All of
Atrium?
our letters with diacritic marks went away. I'm trying to
Mhm.
fix this as many as I can. And then somebody says they wish Gobi would update.
Yeah.
And then my experience is we had a professor who wanted a trial of IBIS World Database and then asked for a video of how to use it. And so I had to figure out how to use a database that never seen before. um, Other than a demo that was 6 months ago because she wanted to wait until the start of the semester.
Mhm.
So that was fun. I just pushed a lot of buttons to figure out what did what.
Yeah. And then April says, as a student working in a medical library, I had to learn to use OVID databases. Librarian gave me a few practice searches to try out. No deadline, that's important. No actual person needing the information. So not learning the database in front of the patron is very important. I tried out all the different features and search options I could, and of course, going back to the literature, those learning guides. And then, yeah, that tendency to just press buttons. I have heard somewhere, so I don't know how accurate this is, and it's about generation, so I don't know how much stock you put into research on generational attitudes, but that millennials in a sense, this current generation are much more comfortable clicking buttons to see what they do than older generations. And of course, everybody's different. So there may be older people who are very comfortable clicking buttons to see what they do. But yeah, you're likely never going to break a database by whatever you are going to do. You may lose your search that you just did. So sometimes I make notes on the side just to make sure that I knew what I was doing so I can recreate something. But for the most part, whenever I see something, my instinct is to click it. And then sometimes there are some jargon, especially technical stuff that I'm going to have to actually open up a new tab and see what does this mean, and it's some computery database or some kind of cataloging thing that I probably should know already. So yeah, this playfulness, this openness to trying things just to see what the consequences are. And so yeah, with Les here from Gen X, yeah, clicking random buttons is easy. Haptics on her phone with new apps is a learning curve. And I'm glad I don't have to swipe in a database. Yeah, and I have, come to think of it, I've never tried a database on my phone. I probably should try that because that's what a lot of the students are doing right now.
It's not very fun.
Yeah, and I also own like one of the smallest phones that I have so that it fits in my pocket and like I can kind of reach the whole screen with my thumb. And so I can't imagine having all of this information on that tiny screen. Yes, Kathy.
I had to teach a class one time over in a professor's classroom and could not get logged in on the internet. And so they had one of those little Elmo overhead projectors. I literally taught the entire class from my smartphone and had them follow along because they didn't have computers, but most of them had a phone. So we did the entire class, catalog and databases on the phone.
Wow.
So yeah, talk about play.
So
It was improvise
Yeah.
and go.
well, good
And I mean,
job.
it worked.
Good. Yeah. And I'm sure with tech now, you can probably use AirPlay to cast your phone from there. So because I'm not sure we even have overhead projectors. I mean, we have projectors hooked up, but like the old teaching style where like it was a translucent piece of paper that they put under the camera, and I don't think we have any of those over here. I guess they have digital versions of that. But yeah, so I don't envy your situation, but good job. Good flexibility there. So talking a little bit, I want to talk a bit about the concept of giving people permission to play. And a lot of this research I'm pulling from Andrew Walsh, who wrote in a relatively new journal called the Journal of Play and Adulthood out of the United Kingdom. And I want to go over this real quick because I think when teaching students, we do know of the concept of library anxiety, this kind of intimidation that students have coming into the library and then dealing with library databases. And a few things that he talks about are some of the barriers that people have just for the concept of play. Because for so many people, the concept of play is a childhood thing. That, you know, they may say that childhood is the work, or play is the work of childhood, but then when people grow up, they feel like they have this maturity that they are past play. And some people also think that playing means wasting time. You know, why are we spending so much time you know, exploring different avenues that aren't relevant to the problem that I'm having right now, which feeds into this perceived value. When we talk a lot about adult learning, a lot of it is structured around the problem that we have. And in this case, with students finding resources for their paper, and why would I want to do anything that's not doing that directly? And so, and then Kathy says that quote from John Lennon, "The time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time." So we need to help them a little bit to enjoy and the time that they might be wasting. Because I mean, sometimes theoretically, education is about learning, right? And you can learn in many different moments and environments. So So some drivers of play that we can think about is, of course, play is supposed to be pleasurable, right? It's supposed to be fun. Curiosity, we've already mentioned, getting to satisfy that curiosity is a driver. And then there's also, Andrew mentions competition and cooperation. And I do want to be careful with this because later on we are going to be talking about games. The concept of competition is going to be driving for some people, but it's going to be stressful for others. If you have a game that's very, very high stakes, where even if if no grades are attached, if bragging rights or what's the term that I'm thinking of that I did not write down? It's related to class. It escapes me, but the perception of others, how others perceive you, if something like that is involved, then the stress is very, very high. And I know of some, trivia games. I can't do trivia games. My ADHD brain doesn't let me recall information under stress like that. And so once it becomes clear that I'm not going to win the trivia game, I check out. I'm not learning anything. I'm not paying attention to anything because why should I attempt to win this game? I'm not going to win it anyway. So sometimes we do have games that are cooperative, where everybody needs to work together to achieve a goal. Click, come on, click. There we go. Sometimes prizes are a good driver, even if they're not necessarily expensive. Prizes, anything as cheap as some candy or some kind of a little trinket or souvenir, something small that they can get theoretically for free, is a good driver. And then if we tie something into a story or narrative, knowing what comes next will drive them to play. And then, of course, play itself. Sometimes it just naturally happens that people just play. And especially if there are no outcomes, like I'm not necessarily going for a goal, I'm just exploring because I'm doing it. There are some alibis that people give themselves to play, which are things that people do to give themselves permission to play when they are uncomfortable playing. One is to ensure their privacy. I'm sure we've all found ourselves behaving in different ways when we're in company of different people. Like I would play differently when in the company of my parents than when I'm in the company of my friends. And if my parents and my friends meet and then we have to play a game, that starts creating some cognitive dissonance about how I'm allowed to play. And so being within out of sight of some other groups helps people play, and sometimes they will make sure that they are outside of certain groups or individuals to make themselves more comfortable playing. Another way is safety in numbers. People are more likely to be playful when there are large numbers of people doing the same thing. So if it's a large crowd doing some kind of activity, then people are more likely to play, and then people will try to pull people they know into the game. Like they'll bring a friend to an escape room so that they can feel more comfortable playing. And then some people will try to make excuses that distances themselves from the play, usually in a way of mocking the play that they're doing or parodying the play and sometimes, in a psychological way, putting on some kind of role where, I'm announcing that I'm a silly guy. And that's what gives me permission to play this game that everyone else is playing. And so being aware of these, a little bit more emotional labor, being aware of how people are reacting to the play. Are they trying to keep out of view of people who they think are more judgmental? Are they labeling themselves as something silly and kind of mockingly playing, means they may not still be comfortable doing this play. So in order to help people transition into play, first of all, we want to set clear expectations, kind of like what I did at the beginning, talk about what we're doing and then ease them into play, starting with very easy play activities very, very early. Like even in my opening slide, I said, introduce yourself in the chat. Very easy opening. Well, I hope it was an easy opening question where there were no wrong answers. It wasn't right or wrong answers. It was a very open-ended question. And then building on play activities as you go. And then as you go along, give people continual reassurance, again, that there are no right or wrong answers, that what they're doing is correct. We can fold it in to the larger conversation, and then checking in frequently. And then give people agency to change the rules. Like in a one-shot session for a library session, I have no grades. I don't assign things. And so it gives them opportunities to change how they're doing things and what exactly their goal is. And then you don't have to play anything correctly. And then if anything makes you uncomfortable, like if you're doing some kind of search on something like a topic like World War II, and you're getting in, and the conversation is going into some very dark places, like such conversations can, you can scrap that conversation. You can take a few steps back and go in a place where you're comfortable doing it. You can use props such as putting questions on cards, small items that you won't mind losing if you use them in a classroom, and even the use of a computer counts as a prop. And then you can also label it differently. Instead of using the word play, and a lot of my activities tend to be from improv, and I never use the word improv in a class. You can call it an activity, or we're going to have a discussion. But first, I would like you to do this or that without using the word play. And of course, modeling playful behavior, being okay with failure, being okay with things going wrong and stepping back and doing it in a different way. If we exhibit these behaviors, other people will see that we're doing it and know that it's okay. Is this emotional labor? Yes, it is. And I keep using the term emotional labor, which you may want to, if you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of research going into it that putting on that happy face and talking to people like nothing in your life is going on, that causes some dissonance, and it is taxing. It, like any other labor, it is taxing. For me, I don't say this as a positive or negative thing. I'm paid money to do labor. And sometimes, especially with students who are in a brand new environment, first year students, brand new to the campus, they're living away from home, and they have all these stressors, they're going to feel many emotions, and part of my labor is to help them be able to learn these skills and be able to process some of these library related stressors so that they can succeed. All right, so what I'd like you to do is in the chat, describe a time that you felt welcome to play or explore, or describe a time that you felt intimidated to play or explore, but once you started, you felt more welcome and included. And in a very general sense, I mean, I went to one conference a couple of years ago. It's called LOEX, the Library Orientation Exchange. that happens every year. That time it was in Ypsilanti, and this was like the first conference I've gone to since COVID started. First time I went on a plane since COVID started. So, after a couple of years just at home with my wife, I was suddenly in a different city. It was very lonely. And it was, kind of difficult getting into being in a large crowd, starting up conversations. But once I did my own presentation on improv, people were a lot more open, and I was able to converse with them. And I mean, would I call this a play experience? Maybe, maybe not. But having back and forth conversations with other people. And I'm going to take that back. That wasn't a good play experience. Let's see. I will let someone else talk. Yeah, Beth says becoming active in OLA. Welcomed and invited. Oh yeah, Rebecca says the creative studio at OSU and got permission to play from the director, and reminded that libraries are fun.
Jennifer says golfing is really intimidated, especially the driving range, because everybody sees you, but you just have to get over yourself because everyone has bad shots.
Yeah, and I can see some people going to a golf range at like 6 o'clock in the morning because no one else is there, so that they can practice their drive.
Liz says went to a conference for high schools for FCCLA, and the speaker had the entire audience play rock, paper, scissors until they got down to 2 people. It was low stakes for me.
Yeah, and probably what the speaker was doing is that safety in numbers that I talked a lot about, that awareness management, that there's not so many people looking at you at once. But since it was an elimination game, there are fewer and fewer people playing. But as they were playing, they were kind of caught up in the moment, so it wasn't as stressful seeing so many people caught up. And Liz, do you remember what the stakes were, what they were trying to win? And as Liz answered, bragging rights. Yeah. So I mean, with a game like rock, paper, scissors, I think most people know how arbitrary that is. And so it's not a test of skill. So it's almost purely luck.
April says at a conference, someone volunteered to take people to a climbing gym. I signed up, was really nervous, but had one of the best experiences, both climbing and making connections with new people.
Nice. And I've had experiences where, we went to a music conference back in college, and in what's that big music city in Missouri? Branson. And they dragged a bunch of us to go do karaoke. And even then, like, back then I was very, very, nervous about karaoke. My singing voice isn't too great. But the thing that got me to be involved is that their catalog included Weird Al Yankovic. And so I was singing a Weird Al song, as part of that alibi, that distancing, the mockery that, I'm giving myself permission to do karaoke because I'm singing a silly song. And then once I got the audience kind of singing along with me, I felt a lot more comfortable doing karaoke. So excellent. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to say that my experience was when I first presented, it was a online conference, and I was like, okay, I don't really have to see everybody's faces. I'll be able to do this.
Yeah.
I have a anxiety disorder, so
Mhm.
I'm getting over it. But I didn't realize it was hosted on I think like Huva, and but we were on Zoom and it was live streamed to Huva. And so I only saw one person, and I'm glad I did, because 400 people wound up watching
Right.
my thing. But afterwards, I felt like really proud of myself, because I was like, I did it, I got it over with. I didn't actually die.
Yeah, yeah,
And I got a lot of really great feedback from everyone, or a lot of people who attended. Not everyone posted stuff. So
yeah. And I'd have to like I'd have to look at the research, because the question in my head is like, when you're doing stuff online, and I'm sure it's different for different people, like, is it more or less stressful when you have the people looking at you or you don't have the people looking at you? Because like if I have people's faces in front of me and I can see their reaction, then that kind of gives me some assurance that I'm saying things that are at least thought-provoking to them. But if I just have, pictures of people, sometimes I feel like I'm just talking to the void. But I also don't see their scowls and know that they are secretly judging everything that I see. So, and I'm sure that that's different for different people. So,
yeah, for me, it's just, if I have my notes, I'm fine. If I don't have my
right.
notes, I forget everything.
Yeah. So, all right. I'd like to talk a little bit about how this fits into the ACRL framework. If you're not familiar with the ACRL framework, don't have time to go over the entire framework today. That's an entire different thing. But the research that I had published looked at some of the language in the ACRL framework and comparing that to the research on play. And while most of these bullet points, these frames, may be kind of tangentially related to play, like you can play with what kind of authorities you want to use in your paper and how you're going to use an authority in your paper, as long as you know how they are constructed and contextual. That last bullet, searching as strategic exploration, I found was the most playful of all six bullet points. And there is one disposition that calls for mental flexibility and creativity. And I'd like to go over these words a little bit. Flexibility is that capacity to easily switch between approaches, that failure recovery. If you're doing one approach and it fails, how easily are you able to try on new actions, new behaviors, new thoughts? And how free are you of established patterns? What else would satisfy the goal that you're trying to reach? Could you even alter or diminish the goal? Is it clear that your question on your research is way too broad on scope and you'll have to limit it? And so with flexibility, a student is free to change their current strategy when the situation makes it clear the strategy is not working. Meanwhile, creativity is the ability to generate novel or unique ideas, and uniqueness is according to the student's context. So like in a K-12 and maybe an undergraduate context, they're not trying to solve the world, right? They're not trying to come up with brand new ideas. They're taking the information that's already in their head and they're putting things together to come up with their own ideas. In a graduate, maybe an upperclassman in a graduate context, especially if you're doing a thesis or a dissertation, your context is the whole world. You are trying to come up with an idea that no one else has come up with. So when a student is being creative, even if they're coming up with ideas that someone 10 years ago wrote a paper about, that's okay, because it is still them coming up with their ideas. That's how they are learning. They're constructing new knowledge. The framework also has knowledge practice, where they talk about divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And divergent thinking includes the quantity of ideas, the ability to come up with many ideas quickly, a variety of ideas, how different those ideas you're coming up with are from each other, and then the uniqueness of ideas, the originality of ideas. And so a lot of people call this brainstorming, coming up with as much stuff as you can. Convergent thinking, people think is the opposite of that, where you're being analytical and critical of those ideas, where you identify the patterns of the stuff you came up with, and you identify solutions. Now, in the framework, they only talk, I mean, it's one sentence. They only talk about convergent thinking about as selecting resources. And so when a lot of people think about convergent thinking as the opposite of divergent thinking, they think of it as selecting a few resources, ignoring everything else, and then you're done. And think about how disappointing that is. You're brainstorming and you're coming up with all sorts of varied and unique ideas only to get rid of most of them. And I think a more playful approach to convergent thinking would include identifying the patterns of the stuff that you found, the stuff that you thought up, identifying the connection relationships to them, learning what resources exist, learning the vocabulary and jargon that they're using, identify the gaps in your own knowledge, identify how those gaps are filling in, identify how the gaps in society, what questions are still overhanging of, how do we solve this issue? Identify your interest and curiosity, and while all of this is going on, selecting resources as you go, and then repeat, reiterate. And then quick word on that meme, the picture that I used. I really tried my hardest doing some searching on getting some attribution to this meme, and as far as I can tell, it's anonymous. So I want to try an activity where we're going to do some divergent thinking and then convergent thinking. So in the chat, name a common topic you've seen first-year students choose for a composition paper. And of course, my example here is immigration. I've seen, I do have one class that's all about OU policies, such as hazing and alcohol policy. And so we have foster care, cancer. Lovely topic, that. Birth control. Used to be a lot of gun violence, but yeah, I guess the teacher got tired of reading about gun violence all the time. Eating disorders. Excellent.
Pornography.
And pornography. I'll go ahead and type that one in.
Oh, that's from me. That was from when I
okay.
was at RSU.
Yeah.
The students were tired of having to do first amendments because, government. And so the teacher was
Right.
jokingly was like, what do you want, pornography? And they're like, yeah. So she was like, okay.
All right. So now that we did some of that, step number 2 is take a look at those answers, pick 2 of them, and then make a new comment where you put those together. For example, immigration and LGBT rights. They do not have to make sense. Don't worry about picking 2 that work together exactly correctly. Just take 2 random ones. All right, we have some interesting responses. And then step 3, will be reply to someone, use that reply function. Reply to someone's two picks and then see what kind of research question or what kind of new topic you can create with those two picks.
Okay, I'm gonna start from the top. Who killed who because they used used birth control? Catholic
I
fiction.
mean, it's a big topic.
Oops, nonfiction.
Right. And because I mean, if you want to talk about current events, there's a big question about, if we're going to criminalize something, the next question is who's liable for those things. And then of course the main question is, should it really be illegal? And then but yeah, there are some, if you talk about the opinions of groups of people who aren't your own and how they came across those opinions, you're going to come up with questions like, okay, what's the next step? What is the logical what logical steps come out of that? So
Oh, I have one for that.
yeah.
Yeah, a student, they were like, this is many years ago. I guess it still could be today. And they were talking about how same-sex marriage shouldn't happen, and that they were just against same-sex, all everything. And I said, okay, so you ready to start stoning people like they do over in the Middle East? And I mean, those eyes got so freaking wide, like, oh. I'm like, yeah, how far are you willing to carry this? And so anyway, it really opened my students' eyes.
Yeah.
The next topic comes up from Kathleen Blackman's, and it is, does cancer drugs enhance eating disorders like bulimia?
Okay. Yeah, that would that's a very good question, because that's going to get into and of course I'm a complete layman when it comes to medical terms, but what that does seem like something where you can gather a lot of data and start seeing, is there a positive, a negative, or absolutely no correlation between taking a drug and then what is that person's, well, I guess bulimia is not an appetite thing. It's
Bulimia is where you make yourself throw up, and cancer drugs causes a lot of people to throw up and lose their appetite.
yeah. So like, is there a black market demand for certain drugs because they for certain cancer drugs because there's a side effect of, what's that new drug that people are taking?
Ozempic.
Ozempic. What was that originally? It was originally something else.
It's a real diabetic medicine, and now a lot of people who actually have type 2 diabetes, that this drug will help them, are having a hard time getting it because so many doctors are prescribing it to people who just want to lose weight, and the manufacturer just can't keep up.
Right. And so yeah, kind of so it wasn't about I'm not sure if you classify diabetes as a eating disorder. It's not an eating disorder, it's something else. But it is something that started for one reason, and then people are found another use for it. But yeah, a very good question. What's next?
And then Rebecca says, Chat GPT says, what GPT? Sorry, my dyslexia.
Oh no, I just
What
laughing.
is the psychological impact of consuming true crime media on individuals diagnosed with cancer? And how does this consumption influence coping mechanisms, emotional well-being, and perceptions of personal safety and morality?
Interesting stuff. So, and yeah,
They have found it helps with all kinds of addictions.
yeah, and I'm laughing because in our conversation with UCD about what we're doing for the second half of our learning module is it's going to be about AI. And we keep thinking like, how can we use ChatGPT to write our title and be a panelist? But yeah, so I mean, as a research question, I would advise a student, especially an undergrad student, to narrow things down, but this has some interesting implications, and I kind of suspect that there might be research out there that have already looked over this, since ChatGPT seems to have ideas about it. So, by the way, Rebecca, your suggestion was eating guns, and can you see that? There are candy guns now. So, and when I just Googled candy guns, I was looking for like gummy in the shape of guns, but I found actual guns that shoot candy. So, excellent. So it is about 3 after 3. Do we want to take a 10-minute break and reconvene, or do we want a 10 or 5-minute break? Say in the chat. How do you feel in the chat? Rebecca just said 5. Liz says 5. All right. So yeah, let's take a 5-minute break. I see 3:04. And I guess if we take a 6-minute break, we'll get back at 3:10. So how about that? All right, welcome back, everybody. So since we talked a lot about play, about the freedom that we have within a more rigid structure, we'll switch over to games, which is kind of the other side of the coin. A game is a structured form of play, and it can be, that structure can be very, very complicated. It can be very, very loose, but typically you'll have a game like something like chess, where we have all these rules, specific pieces that can only move in certain ways, but which piece do you move? Where do you move it? It all depends on the situation. You have a bunch of choices to make. When we talk about gamification, that is, most people define gamification as applying aspects of a game to other areas of life. But if we take a cue about playfulness, where we redefine a mundane situation as play, gamification is also reframing a mundane situation as a game. And so the way most of this manifests in classrooms, especially over the last 10, 20 years, a lot of it comes up as redefining the grading system as kind of a point system, that you made 5 points out of doing this or that thing, maybe even applying some Dungeons and Dragons concepts of like making a character sheet, or gaining experience points, and simply redefining the grading that way. But what I want to look at is a little bit of breaking down of the aspects of a game and seeing what kinds of those things, like the mechanics of a game, we can apply to teaching information literacy, to hopefully encourage that playfulness when they start searching for information on their own. So the parts of a game include a goal or an end state. Sometimes games will have a win state, saying that someone will win or lose. If there are multiple players, one player might win while another might lose. If there's a single player, what state means that you win? So for example, if you are playing a video game and you beat the final boss, that is a win state. Not all games have a win state. If you think of a game like Sim City, or the very popular one that my wife was playing a lot, Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing New Horizons, there's no real end state. And people stop playing simply because it doesn't entice them anymore. And in a game like that, there are goals. There are multiple goals and that you can achieve as you go along, but there's not necessarily an end state. Almost all games have some kind of mechanics, some methods by which the players get to the goal. So in a chess game, the goal is to take out the other person's king. How do they do that? They move certain pieces in certain directions according to the patterns in which they move. And then there are materials. What do the players use? A chessboard, again, is a very physical thing where it has a board and pieces. New Horizons requires a switch and a different switch if you want a different item. There is a narrative, style, and theme. What is the game about? Does the game have characters? Does the game have a certain mood? Something like chess is very, very bland and broad. You might have chess boards that are themed, but otherwise you can play a game of chess that doesn't have much of a style or theme. Of course, it is modeled and compared to things like war and competition. But other games will have other narratives. Sometimes they will have entire stories. Video games have some really intricate stories sometimes. And then there is a briefing, a debriefing, and assessment. So the rules of the game, as maybe written out in some of those old Nintendo and PlayStation games would have a game packet explaining to you what the rules are, what the controls do. The debriefing would be, what Aftermath is, what did you learn, what did you not, and then an assessment of, how you might be able to play the game better, or even do create a new game better. There are educational games, and an educational game will have some kind of corollary to most of these aspects. Included in a goal or an end state, an educational game will also have a learning objective. What do you want the students to learn through the game? Along with game mechanics, you'll have the written rules or the script. The script will be, what do you say every time to every class so that everybody understands what they're supposed to do. Along with materials are going to be constraints. What materials are available? What kind of budget do you have? And what do you have within the arm's reach that could help or amplify this game? And then the narrative style and theme is probably going to be determined by the content that you're trying to, the learning objectives that you're trying to get the students to learn. Sometimes these things are not necessary. Do you need an elaborate artifice when simple mechanics will do? And especially talking to librarians who are probably doing one-shot sessions, you don't have a lot of time to do a lot of world building. And instead, you may want to get directly to the learning objectives. And then along with the briefing, debriefing, and assessment, you have prototyping and play testing so that before you actually launch some kind of educational game, you're going to have to test it with other human beings, other living people who can get other eyes to give you some feedback on what's working, what's not working, and what you have to change. So going through some examples of some educational games, there are a lot of games are going to have this gradient between very high structured games and low structured games. An example of a very high structured game that was popular very popular right before the pandemic, and now they're kind of slowly coming back, are escape rooms. And I know that some librarians in Oklahoma universities are doing escape rooms. I think they're doing it over in Weatherford. And so the goals and objectives of the learning objectives of an escape room is to utilize information literacy skills to find the specific information needed to escape the room, usually in the form of a code that will unlock the door. And in the terms of the ACRL framework, an escape room provides an active learning method to learn information creation as a process of learning to interpret the information that you're seeing. It gets into research as inquiry when you're asking questions about what you see in front of you and putting things together. And then, of course, searching as strategic exploration, where you're experimenting and exploring the environment around you. The mechanics include various puzzles and riddles. The materials and constructs require plentiful materials and space. You may have to limit your participants and give them a time limit, such as an hour or 30 minutes. And then one educational constraint that I typically see in escape rooms are that they're kind of limited to closed questions. So you can't just say, you know, what are you curious about? What are you interested in? Or even closer parameters like what is the current state of healthcare access in the United States? You're trying to get them to unlock a code, which has a right or a wrong answer. And if that code ends up being like a call number from a book, you're going to have to get them to the specific book, not just to a range of books. The narrative style and theme would be very atmospheric, and it can be varied based on whatever theme you want to do. If you want to do like a noir detective theme, or something like Stranger Things, or a Lord of the Rings thing, whatever you think might be possible and interesting for students. And then the briefing, debriefing, and assessment. At the beginning, you will need to tell them about the rules of the room, that everything you need to solve it, this question is here inside the room, please don't tear up our stuff. And then as a debriefing, you can compare their escape time to other people and then inform them of whatever clues they might have missed. On the opposite end, a very low structured game I pull from some educational practices is an activity called Think, Pair, Share. And if we reframe this as a kind of game, the goals and objective is to, of course, discuss and reflect on various topics. The mechanics are think, pair, and share. You think, consider, or write down your answer to a prompt that we just gave you. The next mechanic is to pair, which is to pair up with one other person, maybe groups of 3, and discuss your thoughts with them. And then the final mechanic is to share your ideas among the group. And even within this, I personally do even further mechanics with share. The picture on the bottom, and just checking in, y'all can see the picture on the bottom with the circular tables. Good. That's our active learning classroom. It's set up with a bunch of tables around a podium. So it's a 360-degree classroom. And typically students will clump up like you see there. And so I'll have all the tables discuss an answer to the prompt, such as look at a popular source, look at an academic source, come up with the differences that you see between them. And then when we get to the share part, I will jump from table to table and tell me one difference that your table found. And then once they tell me, I'll jump to the other table, and then we'll go around the room over and over until they've run out of ideas. So that is a kind of mechanic. And so if I need to vary up the mechanic, I can use that to say, well, we'll just discuss it all at once. Or I could assign points and throw out candy if I needed to. The materials and constraints for Think, Pair, Share, if I can, there we go, are not necessary. They may use computers, they may use paper. And then this is open question. I'm asking them, what are the differences that we see, and let's discuss them and dig into them. And then I can also use the ACRL framework, like if they say there are ads in one, we can ask, why are there ads? And then the narrative style and theme is based on content. And then briefing, I tend to explain as I go. First, I'll tell them to discuss with each other what the differences are that they see. And then when I get to the share part, I'll say, now I'm going to go from table to table and give me one example each. Another game that's currently very popular is Kahoot. This is an app that lets you reinforce information learned in a pre-group presentation. So it's a trivia game that's geared toward educational environments like universities and K-12 schools. The win state is to collect the most points. The mechanics, it's a trivia game. You have to put in predetermined questions as well as their answers. So once again, closed questions, and then points are awarded by answering the question correctly and quickly. So if I'm doing a one shot and I mentioned that there are 5 million books in the OU library system, I'll have a trivia game that says how many books are in the library system. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million. Whoever answers 5 million the quickest gets the most points. The materials for this is that you need a Kahoot account and display. There's a free account, and then you have to pay more for more users. And of course, the people have to have a device. Your students have to have a device, one participant. You could have them group up into teams. And then again, closed questions that have multiple choice answers. The narrative is kind of cartoonish. There are all sorts of characters that you can, bright colors to choose from. And then the briefing happens within the game. You might explain the mechanics of it, like how you give the link to them at the beginning, and then and Kahoot is usually used as its own assessment, because I believe it does record the answers. And I mean, in real time, you can see how many people were listening to you when you told them how many books are in your system. And then if a bunch of people got that wrong, maybe you need to be a bit more straightforward on how you presented that information. Two people named Sarah Kahn and Gina Levitin also wrote for the Journal of Play and Adulthood, and they came up with a game that I really like, and I've been using it in my classrooms, called Research Roulette. And so it's based on that frame, searching as strategic exploration. It also came a little bit from their experiences in improv and doing some yes and activities where you build on each other's ideas. And so the mechanics for step one, you have these circular tables, and everyone has a laptop that we provided. You go into the search engine, and you have a topic in mind, and you search for that topic. You put one search term in, and you search for it. Then you either pass your laptop to the next person, or you get up and move to their computer. Step two is that you look at what they search for, and then you add a related term. And then you press search, and then you pass your laptop to the right. The third person will look at the filters that came up, look at the date range, look at this subjects headings that came up, and they will choose one. And then they pass the laptop back to the original person. So the original person put in that first search term, but someone else put in a second search term, someone else added a filter. And then you look at the results of what came up. And then we have a classroom discussion. And then I'll have students raise their hands and say, how many of you found some result that you can use in their paper? Inevitably, some people's hands go up, usually less than a third of the class. How many of you found absolutely nothing? None of the search results that you found are going to work in paper. About a third are going to raise their hands. And then I do ask, how many of you found things that are not going to work for your paper, but they are interested and you're curious about reading those topics? And then a few hands go up. And then we have a discussion on what it was like having someone else's eyes looking at your search. What different choices did they make that came up with interesting results? The materials and constraints for this, of course, a device per person with access to the catalog database. You need at least 3 or more people per group. The play time is about 3 to 5 minutes. Describing what you need to may take a few more minutes, and it really, really works best in a class with a known research topic. And then the more narrow, usually upper division class has better results come out of that. So if they're all looking at, if they're all researching Russian literature, they all have a good idea of the jargon that they're going to be using together. Whereas if you have a very general class where everybody's researching different things, the results get a little bit more varied. Much more or less structured version of that is for me as the teacher to do it myself. And I'm thinking of like a class where I have 100 students in front of me, all facing the same way. And so again, searching and strategic exploration. And what I do is that I'm just going to search a database in front of the class. But instead of having preset things that I search for, I'm going to take suggestions. And just like we did earlier, I'm going to take 2 suggestions. Usually I ask, like, what class did you go to before this one, or are you going to go to? And then I will put those search terms into a database together, and we will explore together what came up. And yeah, explore. And then I'm going to narrate as I go. I'm going to hit key points such as I'm going to use those filters. I'm going to see how I'm going to access this thing that's online. Here's where that citation feature is that automatically builds your citation. And then I'm going to exploit teachable moments. Sometimes I really try to make myself fail in front of the class because that's part of modeling. I'm trying to show them that it's okay if we fail because all I need to do is take a few steps back, choose something else and go forward. Perhaps we need to broaden our search terms. Perhaps we need to narrow our search terms. Perhaps we need to take a look at those subject headings to see what kind of information is coming up. The benefit of this is that the materials and constraints is that I only need my computer and access to the internet. And then this works better with those classes with no research projects, since we're not, it is a little bit more difficult getting them to remember it because the stakes are not tied to what they're researching. But if I'm just trying to demystify a database, this is a good way for me to do it. So I am going to go ahead and do that myself, and my time is at about 30 minutes. Yeah, so I'm going to put pull up my own library's catalog. And then this is a discovery feature, which is going to look up not just the books that we have, but it's a little complicated because it pulls from a lot of our databases, not all of the databases and not all of the information in the databases, but it does give us a very broad amount of information that we can pull from. Sometimes I'm going to go straight to academic search, but this is going to give us a wide variety of books and articles, video, audio, sheet music, and such. So what I would like someone to do, I would like a couple of people to put in a previous question from before. What is a common topic that students do a research paper about? Roe v. Wade, okay. Vaping and where does your food come from? So, I'm going to, for now, I'm going to start with those first two, Roe v. Wade and vaping. Now, I'm going to go ahead and try that. So first of all, I'm going to put in Roe v. Wade, and I'm going to just make sure that how many results I'm getting, make sure I'm spelling everything correctly. And so I got about 8,000 results, and now I'm going to enter vaping. I don't have high expectations for this right now, but we'll see what happens. No results found. Teachable moment. What we can do here is take a few steps back. So Roe v. Wade and vaping are very, very specific terms. So what I can do is go with reproductive rights, because that's what Roe v. Wade was about. And instead of vaping, which is a very specific thing, I'm going to go with, I don't want to say substance abuse. I may just say, what should I say? Drugs. I'll say drugs. And we will see what happens. Many more results. About 11,000. So we went way too broad, but this gives us an opportunity to see what kind of information is about that. Okay, because I said drugs, this is getting into medication. So probably drugs is not specific enough for what we're going with. Let's see, tobacco, that's a good one. All right, so this is much more narrow than the 11,000 that we saw, and now we see 370 results, which is usually I say what, 30 to 100 results is getting to about where it's going to be, where we want to shoot for. So this is good. Global health and human rights is probably the area that we're going to be looking at. I'm not, depending on what your research question is, like how does, I mean, it'd be very easy to have a research question about how does tobacco affect pregnancy. That doesn't get too much into the reproductive rights that we want. You could make parallels between reproductive rights and then the controversies of whether tobacco causes cancer and whether children should have access. So that could be an accessibility thing. So what else do we have? Oh, and let's go ahead and come over here and look at the search terms. And at this point, I would point out how tobacco is a search term when we use it as a keyword, the difference between those things. But can you read the search terms that I have over the subject headings that I have over to the left? Are you able to read that, or are they too small? Thumbs up if you can read those. You can? Excellent. So someone pick a subject heading. Mail. All right. So this will be interesting about the, oh, here we go. The effect of current tobacco consumption on male reproductive hormone profile. So progress in adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights globally. So I am interested in, now can I get over there? Where's my other tab? I'm going to open this up, and then, and of course, this is where I say this is how you access this, but I'm currently interested in how this had anything to do with tobacco. So I'm actually going to take a look. Here we go. In part of the description, which is the abstract at this point, I would talk about what an abstract is. There is some results progress in the multi-burden countries contrasts sharply with increases in tobacco in rates of tobacco use. That sounds interesting to me. As along with binge drinking and overweight. And so there is some connection between reproductive health rights and addiction to other substances. And so that actually may be a good topic of study, a good research question, and then this would be good background information for your the literature review. So, all right. So that is an example of how I would play that game. And of course, it would take a little bit longer for me to put the brakes on to talk about how we could access the PDF of that, what full text means. I'll probably look for things such as things that you can't access immediately so that I can tell them how to use interlibrary loan, how to use full text, where the citation feature is, and all sorts of other things. This is a bit more passive for the audience, but because they are giving me some of the suggestions, they do have a little bit more stake in it than if I just made everything up and tried to do everything perfectly myself. So, next I would like to put, do another activity where we go back to the parts of a game and start making up one ourselves. So just like last time, I have a couple of questions. First of all, go ahead and in the chat, answer this question. What are learning objectives you regularly try to get library users to understand? Limiters and filters, excellent. Peer review.
April says Boolean operators.
Boolean operators. Could you go ahead and put that in the chat?
Yep.
All right, open access, excellent. All right, and refining research topics and quotation marks. Oh, and that's searching using quotation marks, right? So excellent. So next, give a list of what kind of constraints may limit a game. And then once again in your chat, well, actually, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip this one and let's go directly to this question. Think of the games that you know, either board games, card games, video games, party games, any kind of games, and name an individual mechanic of a game that you know. Rolling dice, cards, taking turns. Games of chance. Betting and role playing. Excellent. So now let's put them together. So just like we did in the previous game, take one of those learning objectives that we just put down, someone else's learning objective, and put them together with one of the mechanics that we just came up with. And then, of course, we're not doing the constraint. So I'm going to delete that. There we go. Interesting. Role-playing Boolean operators. And then betting on how many results. That would be, yeah, betting would be interesting because you are making them think about, you know, how the search engine is using the language that you're putting in. And then, of course, how librarians are tagging things with subjects and how much that is used as jargon. So yeah, that would make them really think about how that would be used in a search engine. Open bets, and then yeah, role playing with quotation marks, and then improv on personify what the quotes would say in a search. Yeah. And then poll everywhere. Yep. And then, yeah, that role playing with, and yeah, let's think back on that first one, role playing Boolean operators. Because yeah, April, what would people be role playing? Like, would I take on the role of and then someone else would take the role of or, and then because yeah, like I like this idea. I'm just piecing it together in my head. Because yeah, if I personify and, right, it's like I have objects in front of me. It's like I want a brain, I want a pineapple, I want this mask. This represents and, whereas or is that I want a brain or a pineapple. So what kind of results am I going to get? I'm not sure. Yeah, because because in the popular conception, or means this or this. But oh yeah, this is the play testing, this is the prototyping phrase. So yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, so Rebecca just did a chat GPT again. How can open source information be leveraged to analyze patterns and trends in the gaming industry, particularly in the realm of playing cards, to understand consumer preferences, game mechanics, and marketing dynamics? So yeah, so using open source information for game creation, right? A haiku. Code dealt like cards play. Open source shuffle ideas, innovations hand. Personify what the quotes would say in a search. Because yeah, that would get into I mean, this idea that whatever is in the quotation marks has to be unchanged coming out of it. And whereas everything else in outside of the quotation marks can be changed at all. And this could be like a really quick writing assignments. Like if you have some kind of computer where you could type it in really quickly, is that you could come up with all sorts of paragraphs, even poetry, where like all the stuff outside of the quotation marks comes up somewhere in the paragraph, but the quotation marks has to remain intact. So excellent. And so yeah, so once you have the idea, and you're aware of the constraints at least, you'll have to go over the narrative style and theme. How does this actually interact with your learning objective, the content of the class, and the subjects that they're researching? Come up with the rules that you are going to tell them, and then of course that prototyping and play testing is going to be very important, because some of the crazy ideas that I just rattled off may not work or work with what you were thinking. And then if it's not clear to the someone playing the game, you may have to change things up a bit, maybe streamline some things, drop a few mechanics that aren't working the way you thought. Ideas don't have feelings, right? We can take a few steps back, sometimes all the way back to the drawing board, and then try things again to see if it works out the next time. So I'm almost at the point where I'm going to need to take some questions. These are the resources that I was pulling from. The Journal of Play and Adulthood did an entire special issue on the Playful Library. This is where Andrew Walsh and Conan Levitan came up with their ideas, where I did my research. And then, of course, a couple of books on play here. And then there are a few books on gaming in the library, anywhere from using the library as a place where people can play to actually using video games and such in the library. So I'm going to plug really quickly. The second part of our learning module is going to be on April 11th. It's going to be about AI. Only part of this title was created by ChatGPT, or no, Bard. Bard did it. And then we refined it until we got to something good. The location is to be announced, but we did decide on April 11th. Is that right, April and Catherine? Excellent. So, and then this is my information. You can email me with any questions. Find me over there on LinkedIn. So, excellent. Do we have any questions? Have I used improv in library class? I have. Typically, I use it when we have some high school students come by because they're here for like 5 hours out of a day. And so I have a little bit more time. And so usually I start with an improv game, so that, because part of it is because we are sitting down with them and doing research consultations one-on-one with them. So we like to get to know their names. And so I do have an improv game that I play, which I call the name circle, where we go around, we have everybody say their names, and then maybe say something that they're reading currently. Like I'm reading The Three-Body Problem, a science fiction novel out of China, and then put an action with it, like The Three-Body Problem. Or I just read a Legend-Born young adult novel, and put an action with that is Legend-Born, and then we all repeat it, and then that is a nice, rather low stakes way of getting people to be a little creative, and it also helps me with my ADHD brain connect names to specific things, like the muscle memory of doing an action or interesting things that they're reading. And it's a good icebreaker game. And then as for other improv activities, I may do some things like having them find unique things that they're curious about. And then, of course, that research roulette comes out of an improv game, because you're taking one suggestion, a second suggestion from a different person, and a third. And so that is itself an improv game with that's a lot more structured. So, and then coming up for OLA, I am doing some warm-up activities where we do some of those icebreaker games together. Anything else?
Oops. I'd like to tell one little story, and this is about the library and being creative.
Yeah.
Some of you may have heard the story, but it's one I love to tell. One of my colleagues was teaching in the classroom, and I came out of my office to go across the hall, and a student was coming out of the classroom, and she was bawling. I mean, just crying snot. She went to the ladies' restroom, And so I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I followed her in there. I actually sat down on the ladies' restroom floor with her. And I'm like, what's wrong? She said, he's telling me I have to do citations and I don't know what they are. And I mean, it was just like stressed her out to no end. And so I said, I was like, okay, you have really got to think fast now. What am I going to say to this person? And I said, have you ever said, my mama told me, and then, and she said, yeah, I've said that. I said, well, you gave a citation. You told who it was that told you
Mhm.
and what it was they told you. I said, citations, they're the same thing. It's just they have a couple of extra commas and periods and stuff in them. We can help you get that part right.
Yeah.
She calmed down. Anyway, that is like, I love that story. Being creative.
Yeah. And I did see a webinar last year from the webinar series called Lifelong Information Literacy about it was connecting a citation with trauma management. That I can't remember the exact term, but that it's very, very stressful. Putting all these expectations on students. Trauma-informed citation, I think it was called. And and basically it was about like making citation low stakes. And I've been working with the belonging class here at OU, which talks a lot about how do you belong at OU. And so we talk about citation in the way of belonging. Like this idea came from someone else, just like saying my mother always told me. And so what is the function? Why are we doing citation? You're saying where something, who said something, where they wrote it, or presented it, when it was written, and then how to find it, like either the publisher or the journal and issue number, whatnot. And that's all we're asking for. I've never seen a citation who hasn't had that information. And I may be committing library blasphemy, but it's kind of arbitrary. Every citation puts them in arbitrary different places. Like APA may put the date first, MLA puts the date last. And so all those periods, commas, things, it doesn't really matter where they are. And so we can help you with that. We can give you tools that can generate those for you. And of course, we have citation generators online, but it's just like a street address. You only put your street once on your address. You only put your house number once. You only put your name once. So, but I do like that story, and I'm glad that you were aware of what was going on and that you were able to intervene. So, okay, Rebecca says AI is a really good way to prompt other ideas and opinions as a way to see different sides, like theater of the oppressed. So, and then yeah, like some of the examples that you got from ChatGPT, like I may or may not have come up with those ideas on my own, right? So, excellent. And then like scholarly gossip, Jennifer, that is correct. And then, yeah, and of course it is a little more structured than gossip. Like, hopefully citations don't shift and organically as you, sometimes I have seen that happen, that, someone's name gets misspelled and other people get attributed, but part of it is trying to rein in the gossip of where some information is coming from. So. All right, and then just reminding you, plugging the second half of the learning module is going to be April 11th. We're looking at doing that somewhere in the city, but we'll update everybody as time goes on. So thank you, everybody. I've had a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jay.